Quickly before the video, I want to bring your attention to an interview I did with Allison Morrow on Thursday. Allison is a former broadcast journalist gone independent and doing great work. You may recall I referenced her work on that story of a New Mexico police officer killed by a drug runner in the video I posted last Saturday. Allison and I were in communication after that, and she invited me to do a stream, and it turns out she's the wife of a Marine Corps vet who is very passionate about veterans' issues. For those of you who don't know, these things are extremely personal for me too. My younger brother Wade, my only sibling, was an Army paratrooper whose patrol was hit by IED outside of Kandahar, Afghanistan in 2010. 2 guys died that day, and my brother survived, but he was severely and permanently injured. My brother and I lived together in his house, the house in which I still live and work today, until my brother took his own life in May of 2013. And I've only referenced this part of my story briefly and occasionally, never in the full detail publicly that I did on Thursday. I've always wanted to give it a proper explanation, but it never felt right to make a video about it on my own, and it's certainly no emotionally easy task either. Given Allison's interview skills and her husband's closeness to the issue, this felt like the right opportunity to do it, and I'm glad that I did. Their kindness, their understanding of the issue, and the conversational setting made it easy for me to discuss. So, for a story of brotherhood, service to country, loss, and purpose in the aftermath, plus high-quality independent journalist work I hope you'll check out, find the link to Allison's interview with me atop the description. And thanks for listening if you do. It's a story I've wanted to tell for a long time, and I'm relieved to have told it. And now on to today's video. At this point, it's a weekly event, and someone needs to formalize the TV series Where in the World is Benjamin Crump? The guy is on a tour to appear at any sort of fatal police encounter site so he can racialize it and obfuscate the facts and confuse the public about the story, all while he's happily furnished with national media microphones to do it. You name the Black Lives Matter flashpoint, Benjamin Crump was there. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, the list goes on. And you name the story, Benjamin Crump probably lied about it too. He said Jacob Blake was just trying to break up a fight between 2 women. It turns out he was violating a restraining order against one of them for pending sexual assault charges, but hey, pretty close. He said Ma'Khia Bryant was unarmed, but maybe he meant unarmed just like Jacob Blake, who he also described as unarmed. Giant knives don't count as weapons. Crump has been perfectly consistent about that one. I will credit him there. Benjamin Crump helped invent the hands up, don't shoot lie, and he still perpetuates it to this day. He claimed right after the incident that Michael Brown was executed in broad daylight. And each case needs its own evaluation, of course, but as a general rule, it's a pretty safe bet that if Ben Crump is calling it an execution, what actually happened is something closer to that guy was trying to execute other people and then some form of justice was applied in response. Ben Crump fans the flames and then bemoans the fire. Oh, if only things were more peaceful, he says, while he hides the gasoline and matches behind his back.
I wish we were somewhere else. I wish Ben Crump wasn't so famous. I wish we had a week where black folk weren't just dying at the hands of law enforcement.
And that's actually Bakari Sellers with Ben Crump at his side. That's the legal team for the family of Andrew Brown Jr., who was shot dead by sheriff's deputies in Elizabeth City, North Carolina last week. The facts in that case remain in dispute, but that's no reason to dispute the automatic conclusion. We have to destroy our entire country in response.
I want us to destroy the system that keeps putting us in situations like this. We're going to destroy this system and we're going to reimagine what it should be so we don't have no more deaths like this. Only in this country can you have the trial of Derek Chauvin be interrupted by the death of Dante Wright, be interrupted by the death of Adam Toledo, be interrupted by the death of Ma'Khia Bryant, and now we find ourselves here.
Well, even if we grant that those incidents were unjustified police shootings, which I don't, at least not all of them, Adam Toledo was armed and turned abruptly toward the cop. Ma'Khia Bryant was seconds away from making a pumpkin carving out of somebody's face, but even that point aside, We live in a country with hundreds of millions of people interacting with hundreds of thousands of police officers every single day. You can find bad outcomes if you want to. It's a very big country, and bad things do happen. I could say, oh man, I can't believe we live in a country where a tornado death is immediately followed by a bear mauling. What sort of nefarious systemic evil could have possibly produced this? Just because I show them together doesn't mean that they're linked. It doesn't mean grizzly twisters are a common occurrence or any sort of threat at all. These are totally different stories from totally different parts of the country, involving totally different people with totally different circumstances. But cynically, of course, that's the point. The point is to stir up the chaos. The point is not to organize what seems like chaos into any sort of sensible truth. That's why the protests have been ongoing for days. That's why the mayor has implemented a curfew on top of a state of emergency declaration. That's why the scuffles between police and protesters are happening nightly. This isn't investigative. It's not looking for the truth. This is ceremonial. It's to honor and uphold a preset belief system. And actually, I'm guilty of indulging it. Here I am, way too deep into the video, focusing on activist antics rather than the facts. So let's get to them. What exactly happened in Elizabeth City to bring the circus to town? Andrew Brown Jr. was a 42-year-old black man shot dead by Pasquotank County Sheriff's deputies on the morning of Wednesday, April 21st. The deputies were serving felony arrest and search warrants for Brown at Brown's house. There is neighboring surveillance footage of those deputies arriving at Brown's house. It looks like 4 of them in a truck plus the driver. One of the Brown family attorneys says there were at least 8 officers, though, so maybe more arrived in these other cars. I'm not sure, but fair to say a significant police force descends on Brown's home. There's also this witness footage of the deputies surrounding Brown's car at the end of the incident. During the time between the arrival footage and this footage, Brown's car was shot up by the deputies, and Brown crashed his car into a tree a short distance from his house. There is police body cam footage as well as dash cam footage, but none of that is publicly available yet. It's been the subject of some ongoing legal battles, which we'll get to in a moment. The state is also conducting a medical examination, the results of which are also yet to be disclosed, but the family hired a private pathologist for their own autopsy, and his report says that Andrew Brown was shot 4 times in the right arm, plus a fatal shot to the back of the head. The family and their lawyers were privately shown 20 seconds of body cam footage on Monday, and for now, that's all the body cam footage that a judge will allow to be viewed while the investigation proceeds. And based on that footage, the family and their lawyers are saying that Andrew Brown was executed.
This was an execution.
He got executed. Yep. It ain't right.
Now, granted, this family and their lawyers have seen the body cam footage. I have not. But if you ask me, their description of events sounds totally and objectively implausible. They say that Andrew Brown was just sitting in his car in his driveway with his hands on the wheel when police showed up and started shooting at him first, even though he was just sitting there doing nothing wrong. And since that was rather unpleasant, he then decided that he wanted to leave, but he died from his injuries in the process, I think is their description. Basically, instead of hands up, don't shoot, this family's going with hands at 10 and 2, don't shoot.
Andrew Brown was in his driveway. Andrew had his hands on his steering wheel. He was not reaching for anything. He wasn't touching anything. He wasn't throwing anything around. He had his hands firmly on the steering wheel. They run up to his vehicle shooting. He still stood there, sat there in his vehicle with his hands on the steering wheel while being shot at. He finally decides to try to get away. He backs out, goes around them, and they're still shooting at him while he's driving off.
And even worse, apparently, while the deputies were executing him, they were really mean about it too.
But backs out away from the officers who still shooting at him, yelling, "Stop it, mother." Constant obscenities being yelled at him while he's being shot at.
Okay, so not just a firing squad, but an insult squad too. I guess police really wanted to make sure that his last feelings were hurt feelings. Everything about this description sounds so far beyond belief to me. First, that these sheriff's deputies would just open fire for no reason at all. But even if they did open fire for no reason at all, at point blank range, you're telling me this guy is still just sitting in his car thinking about it? No, you know what? After trying it, after giving it some consideration, I do not enjoy being barraged by bullets from all sides. So I think I'll be excusing myself from this situation with hands properly at 10 and 2 for safety, of course. Good day, sirs, but If you'll kindly let me by, I'm late for my usual Wednesday morning volunteering at the soup kitchen. That just did not happen. Also, I will assume that he wasn't shot in the back of the head before driving his car away. That must have happened during his escape, which I assume incapacitated him and caused him to crash the car. The point being, if the police started shooting him first, and he was just sitting there doing nothing wrong, contemplating all of his peaceful options, did the police just miss all of their shots? It's hard to believe. You're committing an execution, but you still need dozens of tries on a perfectly still and compliant and peaceful man, especially if you're armed not just with handguns, but with rifles too.
Bushmaster AR-223s and Glock 17 handguns. A numerous assault rifles were at the scene.
Okay, so this perfectly peaceful man was just trying to see his way out of a rifle attack. Got it. Even if I buy that, which of course I don't, this Brown family lawyer never addresses an important question. Why was he leaving at all? Because even if you do so peacefully and politely, you don't just get to opt out of a lawfully served arrest warrant. At some level, Andrew's behavior has to be at least part of what happened. It's outright impossible to believe it had nothing to do with it. But that is what the family and their lawyers want us to believe.
At no time in the 20 seconds that we saw where he was threatening the officers in any kind of way.
By now, you're probably thinking that maybe that kind and respectful departure to the soup kitchen wasn't so kind and respectful after all. Maybe there were more details left out of the story so far. Well, there is some support for your theory, at least testimonial. According to the district attorney Andrew Womble, or Andrew Wombley, or Wobble, he has viewed the body cam video. He says Andrew Brown was trying to escape upon police arrival, and in the process of him trying to drive away and police trying to stop him, Brown's car, quote, made contact with law enforcement twice before shots were fired. Now, what does that mean? Made contact with. Does that mean just a gentle tap as he's trying to back out of close quarters, Austin Powers style? Or does that mean he floored it with no regard for the lives of the officers? There's no way to say without seeing the footage, but if it is true that contact was made, that does demonstrate a willingness to physically challenge and threaten officers with a deadly weapon. And this is a guy who has been known to threaten people and injure people with deadly weapons in the past. He had prior convictions on making threats in violation of a protection order, assault, domestic trespass, and wanton injury to a person, in addition to property and other drug crimes for which he was facing arrest on this particular day. It's at least somewhat understandable that police, with that information, might be extra cautious if this guy gets even slightly aggressive. I certainly wouldn't stand comfortably in front of a car with that guy's foot on the gas, but to be as fair as possible to the family and to the activists, we just don't know until we see the video. And per a judge's decision on Wednesday, we aren't going to get that, at least for 30 days or beyond. State law leaves any video release up to a court order. The judge said no. And it's ironic and just factually wrong to portray the police as participating in some sort of cover-up here, as some are. The sheriff's office was actually asking the court for the body cam footage released too. They're on the same side as the activists on this issue. But of course, there will be no credit given for that. The judge says any video release could threaten the safety of the police or investigators and threaten the integrity of the investigation and any legal proceedings that could result. And frankly, it's an argument I just don't get. As if the police officers involved in this operation aren't already under threat regardless. As if these family attorneys spinning media-amplified fairy tales way before the facts ever get out isn't way more damaging to the fair and impartial application of justice than any video ever could be. As if all of the bad outcomes that this judge is worried about aren't already a reality by virtue of the activists and not the facts defining the truth. For the argument on the other side, recall just a few weeks ago, there was a similar police shooting in Nashville, a nearly identical fact pattern actually. An officer tried to make a drug arrest on a woman. She got in her car and shot the cop and then fled. The cop shot her back and she crashed her car off the road. Except in that case, both body cam and dash cam footage were released later that day. And then there was no state of emergency. There was no rioting. There was no activist grandstanding. In fact, it was so crystal clear that Benjamin Crump never even showed up at all because even he couldn't spin that one. And to the judge's concerns, nobody's safety was compromised and justice wasn't compromised either. That cop got the public praise that he deserved. And that lady got the face down tour of a ditch that she deserved. And then we all just moved on with our day without any of the disruptive riots that none of us deserve. If you want safety, truth, and justice, Judge, there is no better way than interrupting Benjamin Crump with a video before his speech ever starts. Let's replace his tradition with that one. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Parler, that is at ML Christensen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.